Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So you are a specialist in sustainability. Could you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'm Cathy Lewis. I am head of ESG at GCX. We're an ESG carbon and waste company where we provide data-driven solutions, software and consulting, anything you need in relation to ESG. I joined recently. Previously, I had my own business, Earth Energy. And before that, I was in the corporate space for many years as group company secretary and then after sustainability. I'm also now doing my PhD on social impact. All very exciting, these things.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's
Thanks,
me.
Cathy. And today you're going to tell us about a case study, a sustainability case study. So what is it that you would like to talk about today? What happened?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. In May 2020, there was an incident that occurred in Western Australia, Rio Tinto, which is one of the biggest mining companies in the world. Yeah, it was a tragic incident, but some good came from it as well. So they were mining for iron ore, as they do, and as part of the process, they destroyed some rock shelters. It made big headlines, and you can imagine the indigenous peoples of the area were very upset because it's key to their culture and key to their heritage. So that was, it caused a lot of ripples internationally, not just in the mining industry and the mining sector, but overall, where corporates sort of took stock and said, whoa, what's happened? What lessons should we be taking from this? Yeah, so that's what I want to talk about today.
So what came from this? What was the bad knock-on effects that happened?
Yeah. If you go onto their website, I must say I have a lot of respect for leadership and management from Rio Tinto, and they are very transparent. So they do continuous disclosure and reporting on the incident, what they've done, etc. But in a nutshell, I think I can summarize the bad in three main key areas. The first one is, they obviously destroyed very important cultural and heritage site of the indigenous peoples, but they didn't live their values. When companies put out their core values, there's a reason why you do that, and you have to live your values. You've got to walk the walk, and they admitted to say, you know what, we breached our own values. So for me, that's even worse than breaching or not complying with legislation, because legislation is a set of rules that an external country, region, international community agrees on, and you've got to comply. But your own core values, that's what you set out to achieve. So that was the first thing they realized, to say, mea culpa, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Secondly, great breach of trust. And trust is arguably one of the most important things for any business. If you don't have trust, you don't do business. And thirdly, closely related to trust is they destroyed relationships. So their own credibility, their legitimacy, their standing in community, not just from an indigenous people's perspective, but all stakeholders looked at this and they said, "Oof, if you do that to one stakeholder, what will you do to me?" And they recognized these three things that has happened because of this incident. Yeah, so those are the bad things that happened because of it.
And what good came out of it?
Yeah, let's focus on the good, because I think it's got a really positive spin on this. Again, I'm going to summarize it as I interpret it from the publicly available information that the company has put out in the public domain. For me, the most powerful thing that came from this is a deep reflection and introspection that the company had, not just from the CEO's perspective or the board's perspective or the chairman's perspective, but it seems like company-wide, people stopped and said, "Oof, maybe I need to take a minute. Maybe I need to stop focusing on my activities and start focusing on thinking about this and understanding what has happened? Why is it important that I take note of this? And more importantly, what should I be doing? What should I not be doing? What should I be doing more of? And focusing on restoring those three things that I spoke about. So reflection, introspection, very important. From that came the realization that, you know what, sometimes it's more important to listen than to speak. So maybe we should just be quiet for a minute and listen to our stakeholders and understand what are their needs, what are their expectations, what are their desires, what is important to them, because what is important to them might not necessarily be important to us, case in point. And let's just realign so that understanding that true leadership and living your values equates to listening to your stakeholders. Following on from that is once you listen, you engage differently. So a wonderful thing that happened here is that there was a shift that occurred. As I said, I read on the website, and they appointed a senior person to assist with the engagement with the indigenous communities. And what came out was to say, traditionally it was a very transactional approach, very corporate. What do I get? What do you get? Let's negotiate. It was an absolute negotiation. Now it's more of a value relationship approach as opposed to a transactional approach. And that is powerful. That means it's not about how much do I get out of the deal to your detriment. It's not a win/lose situation where you often have in litigation or where you often have in commercial transactions. It is finding that sweet spot in the middle where I understand what is important to me from a company perspective. Equally important, I understand what is important from your perspective as a stakeholder. And now that we've listened better, we've done some inner work, reflecting, etc., we understand that it's not an either or. When it goes, when I'm in a better position, you're in a better position. And that for me was like really good takeouts from this. And apparently it has permeated the culture. Again, I can only talk to what I've read on the website. It's not as if I've engaged with the company or worked with them, but that's definitely what I can see from what they've disclosed. But I cannot think that it's not that way because there's a lot of information in the public domain.
So what steps are they taking to transform the business? You mentioned greater awareness of these issues, but is there anything else that we can learn from this example?
Oh, we can learn so much. What they've done, and that's like typical corporate, which I have a lot of respect for, they get stuff done. They're like, okay, we've got a problem, let's deal with it immediately. They've doubled the number of people that are responsible for engagement with stakeholders. That's phenomenal. They've understood that it's a science. As you need mining engineers, hydrologists, climatologists, accountants, HR specialists, the whole range. Equally so, social sciences and engagement specialists are a crucial part of the team that they need because it's a multidimensional and multidisciplinary approach that a corporate needs to take. So that was the first thing. They've built up their teams with specialists to have a proper engagement approach. I wouldn't call it a strategy. It's more of an approach. Obviously, there is a strategy, but again, it's a shift in worldview and understanding. Respect is now playing a key role. Also, what they found is what would I call it? The elegance or the grace. I think that was the word that they used. The grace that the indigenous people have. They have indigenous knowledge coming from like many, many, many years ago that we can only dream of. And now corporates are starting to realize the value of this indigenous knowledge. You cannot think that just because you've studied something at university or some tertiary institution or scientific knowledge, that is primary knowledge. No. There are different kinds of knowledge, and each source of knowledge has got its place, and you've got to work together. So we're not saying forget about scientific knowledge. You don't have to worry about your geological studies. No, it's very important, but bring in all of these other sources of knowledge to have a beautiful whole. So that was the one thing. And then secondly, they've now moved to implement what they committed to do. They've formed a foundation, which is fantastic, together with the indigenous peoples of Australia in this instance now. So this co-management heads of agreement was signed in May 2022, 2 years later, which is a non-binding agreement with the aim of putting something binding in place. That's phenomenal, right? So it shows you putting your money where your mouth is. They've developed policies, they've developed a whole approach how to incorporate the needs, the expectations, the engagements of this specific stakeholder grouping. And I'm trusting that this will flow over into other stakeholders because, a company's got many stakeholders. It's not just one stakeholder grouping. So these are the things that they are doing. And then the last thing that I want to say is from these contractual arrangements, there were a few tangibles that came out as the last bit of what we want to talk about. As I said, the Yukon Gorge Legacy Foundation was established. How they did this is it's not a top-down driven company or corporation approach. They sat with the elders, they sat with the community, and they co-created. So the focus is on co-management and co-creation. And if you think about this for a second, it's a totally different way to which corporates normally work. When you develop something, whether it's a project, growth strategy, implementation of anything, that's my experience. You sit, you evaluate, and it's a sort of a top-down approach. And you say, this is what I think we're going to do. Go forth and conquer, And now you can go and talk to people. We'll have public participation, but we're telling you, we've already done the homework. This is what we're going to do. And with these engagement sessions with the indigenous peoples, a key insight, which is actually obvious, if you have high levels of empathy and you can understand where another person comes from, afterwards you can go like, but of course. They said, please don't do that. Before you decide, can we please engage? It's as important to us as it is to you. This is our land. This is where we live. This is our culture. This is our heritage. Can we co-create and co-decide the viable options? And then we will refine, and then we will decide how we're going to go about it, implement the actions, and follow through. And that is a much of, as I said previously. So that is a big thing that has happened. They're working towards finalizing this. And then they also disclosed on an annual basis. So the most recent one that I could find was released in October 2022, which is not that long ago. It's the Communities and Social Performance Commitments Disclosure that Rio Tinto has made available. Yeah, so I'm excited about this, and hopefully other corporates and other entities, it doesn't have to be in the corporate space. It can be NGO, it can be, political, it doesn't matter what it is. But take some learnings from this and understand the importance of listening, respect, trust, integrity, living the values. Do what you say you're going to do, and don't just give beautiful core values and it's like for something for a poster on the wall, but it doesn't permeate the culture. So that's my story.